We are very fortunate to have Dr. Makgati Mokwena with us this evening. Now, what impresses me most about you is your commitment to your spiritual path. You have done a lot on your spiritual path, more than most. Now, I'm interested in how much of that stems from your childhood, because you grew up in a Catholic family, is that right? And your mother became a traditional healer.
Yeah.
How has that fueled your path in your life?
The way it fueled my path is in the sense of being introduced to spirituality, well, certainly to religion at an early age. And I don't think that's necessarily strange for a typical South African family. What is peculiar in my case is precisely the point that you made, that at a certain point in my life, my mother received a calling to become a traditional healer, and she went through the whole initiation. I can't remember, I was young, and it feels like she was gone for a whole year, if not 2 years, and my father had to look after us. She might have been gone for a couple of months, but what it means is that she left, and she was initiated by an old woman that we called Makgolo. And in the then Limpopo, well, it was Bopedi, but it's now Limpopo. And she came back. And when she came back, she continued on that path, on that traditional African spirituality. But alongside that, she continued continued practicing the Catholicism, she and my father. And she managed to weave the two together to such an extent that some of the work that she did later on was working with young people young men who were training to become priests. She worked with priests. She and really educating them around how to integrate, how to work with an African worldview within Catholicism. Yeah.
Did you ever feel that calling to become a traditional healer?
No.
It's never happened for you?
It's never happened. However, what did happen is my mother passed away in 2009. And after she passed away, I was devastated. It was it was the biggest thing actually that had happened to me at the time. And I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look at photographs of her. I couldn't think about her without breaking down. And I never dreamt of her. So I didn't look at her photographs, and I never dreamt of her. And then the first dream that I had of her was of her initiating me after she had died. And when I told my father was just devastated. He said, "Oh, how can she do this? This is such a difficult path." But essentially she initiated me from the grave. She used to have lots of conversation with me about being called, about practicing. She tried to teach me how to read the bones for divination. I never really got very far with it, but she found a way to bring me in after she had passed on.
Did you find that your spiritual or psychic abilities shifted after that?
I think much later. I think that what happened is, well, my father died in 2010, so a year after my mother died. And even though I had been on a spiritual path, just to come back, and I'll piggyback the response to your first question onto this one. But I was always yearning. I always had a sense that I'm not enough. And that something is missing. And having that sense that maybe something that's missing is missing inside of me. And looking at my childhood and figuring that, maybe the way I was raised left me with some deficiencies of enoughness. And so I was constantly seeking. And I remember when I turned 21, instead of having my parents throw me a big party, which is very typical, I asked them to please rather use the money to send me to Israel. And I realized much later that, actually, that Israel is such a big pilgrimage space for many people. And I think it might have been my very first pilgrimage in life. But so that path has been a long one. And it's only, I think, in the past 7, 8 years that it intensified. So it always been there, but in this past decade, the energy has intensified and really pushed me to think and to feel and to be different, to be even more intentional about my spirituality. And just from that intentionality, I think then the gifts, I started removing and opening up, parting the blocks, parting the veil. And in parting that veil, through the work that I was doing, I started, things that had always been there, I think, started landing inside of me or emerging inside of me so that I could use them more intentionally.
So when you talk of this parting of the veil, what sort of things were you doing to take your spirituality deeper?
I've been a student of A Course in Miracles, a very poor student of A Course in Miracles. A very, very poor. However, the lessons that I do learn, that I have, that have stayed with me, I take them seriously. I try to put them into practice as much as I can. So when the Course says, I'm not a body, I'm free, for I am as God created me, I take that seriously.
Now, what I wanted to ask you, that lovely lesson that you mentioned, I'm not a body, I'm free, for I'm still as God created me. You also write in your blog about going to hospital with a stomach issue. Were you studying A Course in Miracles at that time? And did you call on some of the lessons through that process? It was quite a profound and important a part of your life, a big lesson, I think.
Yeah. So in 2015 was my first visit to hospital. Well, when I was 44, which was 2009, was my very first visit to the hospital. And I think by then, I was studying A Course in Miracles. I actually started it. I was introduced to it when I was doing my master's in the US. I met it in 1997, 96, 97, and have been on and off. I've been a very bad student. Don't be impressed at all. So on and off, it's had great significance to me. And absolutely, when big things happen, either it's very much elevated in my consciousness. Sometimes it's not so much elevated in my consciousness. However, I do always call the Holy Spirit. I call our brother. I ask for help. But I also am aware that the help may come in a way that I'm not necessarily aware of. And that, in fact, the worst thing to do is to ask for help and expect the help to arise in the way that my eyes will recognize. Because I know that our senses are quite limited in being able to perceive the subtleties of the work of spirit. But having said that, I mean, my life was saved twice. In 2015, my life was saved because I had major things happen in my stomach. Well, with my ovaries, not my stomach, but with my ovaries. I had a big ovarian torsion and it had ruptured. And had I not had the surgery at that time, there could have been some sepsis happening there. And that's not usually a good thing to have.
And how did that miracle arise then?
I got to the hospital. I was sent back because the doctor said, "Oh no, what you have is," she said, I needed to go to the toilet, constipation. She said, no, I can see a mass in your stomach, but you actually have constipation. Here's a script. This is the middle of the night. Here's a script. Fill the script for a laxative and you'll be fine. And the pain, and I got hooked onto an IV, pain-killing IV, and then I was discharged, and my friends dropped me off at home. And And throughout the night, I was writhing around. I couldn't manage anything. And in the morning, I sent an SOS. Literally, I just typed SOS in my friend's phone. And she and husband came quickly, and they drove me back to that same hospital. And when I arrived there, the doctor attending me said to me, "I refuse to believe that constipation can cause so much pain. I would love to investigate further." And through that investigation, if he hadn't sent me for CT scan rather than just a regular X-ray, they would never have discovered, they would never have known. But even in identifying that there were some cysts growing on my ovary, but when the surgeon went in there, he hadn't even seen that the problem was much bigger than anticipated. And he had thought, oh, this is just going to be a quick 20-minute surgery. But it ended up being much bigger. And that's really the first time that he saved my life. And the second time was just last year where I wasn't coming back after surgery. I had 2 hernias and an intestinal obstruction, and my system just decided, oh, we like being away, we're not going to come back. And I think just the last minute, I came back into my body. I suppose I still had some work to do.
Yeah, you're dancing with death.
And the death, and I'm going to say that the death goddess, that dark goddess, has been a companion of mine for the longest time. And I feel like, I mean, I love that you're calling it dancing with death, because that's exactly what it's been. Where she has just taken me by the hand and said, we are going to walk you through the most unbelievably painful things, so that you understand that in life there is suffering, but you don't have to get attached to the suffering. Suffering is not who you are. It's not a birthright. But here it is.
So quite a profound experience.
Experiences.
Experiences.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm interested in, as you've taken your journey deeper, you've also experimented and done some work with plant medicine. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I have another story to tell you about A Course in Miracles, and I'll come back to it. I responded to the call of plant medicines through a program, a show that I'm involved in, and I can't really talk too much about it, but it is about the exploration of people's spirituality and the practice that people engage in, the practices that people engage in order to deepen their spirituality. And in that program, we look at a couple of things, and a couple of modalities that get used in order to achieve some non-ordinary states of consciousness, which assist one to go right past this constant chattery ego voice and connect to the voice of divinity within. And so in January, I took ayahuasca. And then I had a journey with psilocybin. And after my psilocybin mushroom journey, I knew that this is my medicine. And I understood from that first journey that I'm going to be journeying with psilocybin for 12 months. After that first one, for 11 months after that first one. What are you initiating me into? What is this? It felt like psilocybin has a big piece of gift to give me. And it has been giving me.
So after the first journey, what are the gifts that you feel are arising from that?
One of my biggest yearnings in life was having an experience of God. And I would read other people's books and hear other people's stories of how they encountered God. And I was yearning, I was torn that I wasn't having that, that experience felt unavailable to me. And I mean, I have to say that my journeys with plant medicines are not, it's not natural for me, because I feel like, well, I'm cheating actually. I should be having these experiences without the assistance of a medicine. But having said that, what has happened is that I know that I am never alone. I know that I've experienced that. Another big gift that I have received, and this comes from my second or third journey, is that the idea of God that we have been taught by all the religions in the world is such a devastatingly false idea. Because when I thought of God, it was a being. I thought of a being. I knew soon enough in my life that God isn't some white man in the sky. But the continual reference to God as a he has robbed us of even contemplating of the all-encompassingness of what God is, not even of who God is, because once we conceive of God as a who, us, humanity's own image gets in the way, and we try to find a being. And God isn't that. There is ineffable, God is difficult to even speak of. And I heard somewhere somebody saying, I don't know if I was watching something on YouTube or somewhere, somebody saying, there's a reason why in the Old Testament, and I don't know the Bible, but in the Old Testament, that when God was appearing, people had to take their shoes off, and the first thing was, don't be afraid, because the awesomeness of it with a capital I is everything. And that's what psilocybin has gifted me.
And so did you feel an experience of that in the journey? In the journeys?
In the journeys. Yeah. One of the journeys was just, it was just bliss. It was bliss after bliss after bliss. It was, I mean, I got to understand the importance of sound. I know that, and maybe I'm making it up, but I got to experience myself as sound, and understood that sound has a big role to play with who we are and where we are in the world. And I got to experience myself as sound, and I got to experience, my senses became so heightened. And beyond my senses became so heightened. And just having these profound experiences of infinite love, and just resting in the lap of infinite love. And that infinite love that just completely approved of me, and completely loved me, and completely and in my journeys I would say, oh no, but there are all these things that I'm asking for forgiveness for, and I almost had a sense of asking for forgiveness for what? Like, you're crazy. That's nothing. What are you talking about?
It reminds me of one of the lines from A Course in Miracles, actually. God does not forgive because God has never condemned.
Exactly.
It is us that needs to
It's
forgive because
us
we're the
that
ones who've come back.
precisely, yeah. And I had that experience. You think you what? And just being laughed at. My biggest lesson in that is, life, there's a lot happening in life all the time. There are many layers of narratives that are happening at us, to us, by us, because of us. And we get so hooked in this physical realm. It's the only experience that is available to us. And that these senses that we have, how many senses do we have? These senses that we have, that they are the only tools that we have available to us.
Yeah.
But actually, and if we only rely on only them, then we lose out on the profundity of who we are. We lose out on the immensity of who we are, because we're made of the same substance. When I was having my experience of divinity, my sense was, I am made of the same. There was no me, there was no God, there just was. And if we knew that, I think if humanity really knew that, not knew it, not knows it in their head, but really knows it as an unassailable truth, I think that we automatically would know that we are worthy. We would automatically know that we are complete as we are. We do not need to take from another in order to make up for what we believe is missing in ourselves. Nothing is missing. And that doesn't mean that, we can't have fun with things. I call myself Pilgrim in heels. I love my heels. And so it doesn't mean that we have to switch off from playing in the world, but we can play in the world from a place of fullness and from a place of completeness, because we are. We really are. And all the things that are happening to us, even though some of them may be painful, but even the pain doesn't have to, it can perhaps be a journey through, not the full destination. It can be, well, what do I need to learn from this? What is the gift that I need to uncover from this painful experience? And I hope I'm not coming across as if I'm diminishing devastation that we experience in the world. I'm absolutely not doing that. What I am saying is the devastation is there, and there's also something else.
Yeah.
And that perhaps if we can hold the two, if we can hold the two lightly, and maybe eventually we can start maybe inviting something else. Maybe we start opening up to something else.
It's like a shift in perspective. And another line from A Course in Miracles, all things are lessons God would have me learn.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's one line that has really shifted things in my life, because just shifting that perspective, it turns a problem into a lesson.
Right.
Changes things.
And of course, when you are in the problem, in that moment, it feels like, what do you mean there's a lesson? I don't want a lesson. I want this problem sorted right now. And that can become incredibly upsetting for the one who is holding the problem. When I was writhing around, or when I've experienced racism in my life, when I've experienced people who overlook me and refuse to see me, in that moment, I'm not thinking, let me forgive. I'm thinking, all sorts of obscenities. And later on, maybe do I come back to, okay, Makgati, what do you need to retrieve from that experience? And how can I have that experience without personalizing it to the extent that I take away the lesson from the other person, from the wrongdoer, from the perpetrator? Even already by giving these names, we are saying there's going to be a victim and a perpetrator. And of course, those definitions already create barriers between one another. But I'm interested in what is it? What is it that invites a person to relate to another person in the most hateful way? What is missing? And as I said earlier, I think that part of what's missing is the not knowing that we are all made of the substance of God. We all are exactly as God has created us, as God is, which is love, which is complete. Yeah.
So you do some interesting work in corporates with business leaders. How do you marry this experience and this wisdom and knowledge that we're all one with the work that you do?
Before I enter a space, I do what A Course in Miracles invites us to do. And it's not just what A Course in Miracles, I mean, it's stuff that I learned even from my mother when I was growing up, is that before I do anything of great importance, excuse me, you see this water, I call on all the emissaries. I call on my ancestors. I call on our brother Jesus. I call on the Holy Spirit, and I say, I'm about to go and do some work. Please come with me. I call them, and I've called them for the longest time. So it doesn't really matter what I'm doing. I call them and I ask them. Before coming here, as I was driving on my way, I said, listen, you have to give me the words, because I do not have the wisdom, but I know I can provide a very flawed vessel through which some of the wisdom can come through. So I work like that. And when I interact, I don't get attached to a particular result, because I may not necessarily see the result in the immediate. Maybe something that comes through me, maybe it lands in a particular way, maybe it creates a discombobulation in a person, and maybe they don't like it. But perhaps when they walk away, perhaps a month, maybe the following day, maybe 6 months later, maybe a year later, something stays. Maybe it's a planting of a seed, and something stays, and then maybe much, much later, it bears fruit. And so in that way, then something happens. But I also know that this isn't the only lifetime that we have. I know that we have multiple lifetimes, and perhaps the seed isn't born, the fruit doesn't come to fruition in this particular lifetime, maybe in another lifetime. I don't get hooked on what people walk away with, or else I'll drive myself crazy. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if there's any questions coming in on the chat. Do you think that it is necessary for all on the spiritual path to explore plant medicine to enhance one's connection to God?
No, absolutely not. I know for a fact that it isn't necessary. And some people, I mean, I know that experiences such as breath work can elicit powerful experiences. I know that there are many others. There are many, many different experiences that people can explore in order to have that experience of God. And I also want to say that for me, even though my yearning was to meet God, I think I had a particular way. And I think that what has happened is recognizing that because we are made of the same, we are divinity. And if we switch in our being, that recognition that, oh, actually, right now, this is a meeting of that which is made of the same substance, that every single moment then is a conversation with God, is a meeting with God, is an interaction, is an experience of God, regardless of how off-putting that can be, or how enlivening that can be. But those moments are always there.
Because I suppose in your experience of divinity for yourself and being at one with the divine energy, that's true for everybody.
Absolutely.
So everybody's got this divine energy.
We all have it, and it's about our awareness. Are we aware of it?
Yeah.
And it's the lack of awareness that has led us down the path we are on right now as humanity, as the human race.
Yeah.
And we've completely disconnected from that truth. And it's a truth with a capital T, therefore it doesn't ever change. It's not a version of truth, but it is the truth that we are.
Yeah. Now, some of your work is perhaps more spiritual than the leadership training, the rites of passage ceremonies,
Yeah.
and you do creative arts therapy. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So how do you bring this experience of divinity into that work, and how is it impacting the people that you're working with?
I mean, if we're talking about opening up and working with consciousness and working with awareness and working with opening up to a truth that exists beyond what our ordinary states of consciousness will allow in. And so when I do any work with any client, I always hold the understanding that something much bigger is happening here, and that something else is the energy that's being exchanged, even with corporates, that there is an energy exchange here, and it is an essential energy exchange. So whether I'm working with young girls, whether I'm doing a marriage, whether I am doing arts therapies, that opening up to a creative aspect of self, and that creative aspect is one way that we can start gaining access to information that is not always available to us. Creativity is that world that when we start playing in it, we start opening doors to what we can't always access through our reliance on the rational. I feel like the rational world closes doors to our connectivity because it wants things to be defined and dissected and explained and hypothesized on and predicted. Now, if you're going with that, it's a disallowing of spirit to come and visit. And so when we open up and we start engaging in what doesn't make sense and holding uncertainty and working with curiosity, that's really when we can start inviting for messages to arrive. Yeah.
So with the creative arts therapy, like how does that look and how is it helping people and what sort of people is it helping?
When I work with clients, I will have, the thing about creative therapies is that one of the premises it's based on is that we can use speech to hide what we actually want to say. And so when I work with clients, by offering them a different language, the creative arts, they tap right in there into the deeper aspects of the psyche, and they can bring out information that's not even available to us. They can go deep into the unconscious and give voice to the unconscious, and the unconscious is not available to us, of course, that's why it's unconscious. But so working with the creative arts, it can tap into what I myself cannot see with my senses, and that gets projected onto a page, perhaps in an image, and then we can reflect on whatever is happening by talking about it. It also gives, so it's a way of assisting people not to hide, but it also gives them a language that isn't, some things are difficult to speak about, but the language of creativity is just, it's so much vast. The English language is limited now. I'm Motswana, and Setswana is limited. Our human languages are limited. And we cannot even fathom what we do not know. And creativity is one of the spaces in which we can allow ourselves to invite the unfathomable to emerge.
I think when one looks at creative works,
Yeah.
music especially, you can see the divinity just flowing through that musician,
right?
You know, coming out as music and words and so on.
I mean, they call it inspiration for a reason. It's the breath of God. And that's exactly what it is how, you know, in the work, assisting people to be able to step out the way so that breath can then be captured or it can be seen. Either in movement or as a piece of, as an image. And it's not about getting caught up in what does the image look like, but rather what is it expressing? What is the story that is contained within that image?
To be a pen in the hand of God. You know, even Rumi speaks of it, the wood, the reed,
the hollow reed.
The hollow reed and the hand of God, or having the breath of God flowing through. And it's just, the imagery is beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We respond. The thing that happens when we are presented language that is not even language, but the image, when we present it with images, we bypass this rational mind that wants to pin things down. And we really step into the imaginal realm, which is so much more generative and productive and can give so much more. So it's a beautiful, I mean, this is why we want our children to play, because we know that when they are in that space and there is utter freedom, that they are possibly connecting with something that we ourselves long for and have forgotten. Yeah.
Okay, let's take a question from the audience. There's a question from Leon. Would you describe your perspective as non-dualistic?
Would I describe my perspective as non-dualistic? I am hoping to get to the experience of the non-dualistic, but I'm very much aware that the dualism, I mean, that's how that's how we experience the world. And I am working, where I am right now is in being able to hold both. So I think sometimes we split so much that the other part is not even available to us, you know, so we over-identify with one and we don't see its opposite, its shadow aspect. And so what I'm working with right now, the process that I'm at right now, is in being able to hold two. So how do I make space for paradox in my life? So that eventually I can recognize that the paradoxes actually can come together. Oh, I want to share a story, something that happened in a journey, and I think this will speak to it. My last journey, psilocybin journey, which was a very difficult journey, because I've always seen myself as a bridge. It's a very difficult journey. And there are, you know, I know that there are no such things as difficult journeys, but journeys that have a profound message to give. And the message is just arriving in a really difficult way. So I kept hearing this sound of iron, of just this grating sound all the time, as if a grinder was grinding against iron, as if somebody was cutting. And it was just, it lasted throughout my journey. It was horrible. It was horrible. And at some point I giggled because I thought, oh, the iron actually is when maybe a bridge is swaying and maybe it's not a very well constructed bridge and there's metal rubbing against metal, maybe that's the sound. And I giggled to myself and I said, Makgati, you see, if you want to turn yourself, if you want to see yourself as a bridge, this is what happens, you know, it'll present itself like that. And then the next moment, I was told that, Makgati, maybe you can actually envision yourself as love. And love as a unifying force. And love as that which brings two disparate pieces together and it unifies them. And I literally saw myself turn into the regular image of a heart that we see as love. and this left ventricle and this right ventricle and them coming together and meeting one another in the center and recognizing that, oh, actually, maybe that's what I do. Maybe that's who I am. Okay. Maybe that's who I am. And so with the duality, it really is about, yes, here are these two opposing forces. And can they come together and form oneness and celebrate the oneness? Because that's really what they are.
And love is the bridge.
And love is the bridge.
Yeah. Hey, Makgati, can you comment on this time of pandemic from a spiritual perspective?
There's a lot that has been said about this being an opportunity for humanity's ascension, and that when enough people bring some conscious awareness to doing their inner work, that mass of us, that it can help lighten the world, and that perhaps what this pandemic has done, it has literally forced us to, it's forced us into our homes and to be quiet and to unplug and to be still. And the thing about the voice, the Course in Miracles calls it the voice of God. And I think that there's something about the stillness of it, that it is a still, silent voice. We cannot hear that still voice if we are rushing around in aeroplanes, we are getting in our cars, being stuck in traffic. The world is too much with us. And what the pandemic has done is it has switched off, and it has assisted us to unplug from the noise of the world. Now, what we do with that, of course, is up to us. Whether we do pay attention to, oh, okay, there is a sane voice, a loving voice that is offering us guidance. Whether we listen out for that, or whether we listen out for, this, lockdown must end and we must go back to work, the economy, da, 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 da. All of that is valid. I'm not saying it's not valid. All of that is valid. But we have a choice. Which voice do I listen to? And recognizing that the voice of the ego will always be loud. Of course, it's the ego. It wants to be, on top and be overbearing over everybody else and over everything else. And the voice that is true guidance is a gentle, silent voice. And when we sit in stillness, when we sit, whether I am sitting and I'm pathing with my ancestors and I'm listening, or whether I'm walking on the mountain, or whether I'm outside and having a deep, meaningful conversation, interaction with somebody, that can be a way of allowing ourselves to really listen for guidance, so that the next steps we take are enlightened steps.
Yeah.
They have light. They are being lighted. Our steps have light preceding them, rather than the avaricious appetite for the world. The world is nice, it's delicious, but we can get lost in it.
Yeah. So in your interactions with the corporate world, with leadership at a business level, do you find any shifts taking place? Do you find any business leaders starting to listen to this still, quiet voice?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. The corporate world is very different from what it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. There is an understanding that leadership is about service. There is an understanding that people matter. There is an understanding that if we don't pay attention to our sense of self, that we cannot lead, we can really only manage, we can really only command. And so that sense of self is a critical component from practicing leadership It's a necessary space. So that constant examination and an attempt to develop self-awareness. Absolutely. I mean, when I do my sessions, we start with a mindfulness practice. And I know, at first people, what is this? What's going on? And I just persist because I know it's important. It's important for me, and I know that it's going to help.
Yeah. And you find, in the business world, people are more receptive to the mindfulness and a few practices to.
I mean, occasionally, absolutely. Yeah. And also remembering that, of course, the business world is populated by human beings who, people who have homes and people who have families and who have desires and pain and some things land.
Makgati, at this point of your journey, and you've done a lot of things, what is the most important thing? What is the most important takeaway? If you were going to give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
I'm loved. I'm loved. I am loved, and stop looking for love outside of yourself. It is only within. It's only within. And when I discover that love, when I discover the blocks that hide me from that experience of love, that already is a big gift. And so discover the blocks, work on removing those blocks so that I can fully settle in that love. That's big.
Yeah.
And it's big not just for me. So how do I experience that love? And then how do I live that love? So that in the world, the energy that I put out is the energy that is love-filled. And hopefully, one interaction at a time, there can be some impact. Maybe.
I'm sure there will be. Makgati, I just want to say thank you very, very much for being here this evening. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experiences and your love, and for being a bridge, for being a bridge into this world. So a big, big thank you.